I didn't think it would be mysterious. It sounded very basic that you give somebody money and they say thank you, and that should be it. But we learned that that was actually not the case. And with our first donation, actually the word thank you wasn't even said. We have the largest number of young, rich people, wealthy people that we've ever had in the world. And we also have women who are now controlling a lot of the world's wealth. They're saying that 60% of donations to nonprofits have probably a lot to do or decided by women. And yet the young people who are now becoming wealthy when they're young and the women and other ethnic groups are just still ignored. And I know a lot of nonprofits who say you can't ask someone for money over Zoom. And that's just not true. I'm much more happy with somebody asking me for money over Zoom if I don't have to go to the lunch.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. This is episode 175. My name's Rob Woods, and this is the show for fundraisers who want ideas and maybe a dose of inspiration to help you raise more money and love your job. Now, if you'd like to attract more young people to support your charity, this is the episode for you. Because this time, I was thrilled to be able to talk to the philanthropist and author Lisa Greer. I've really enjoyed both Lisa's books. Her first is called Philanthropy Revolution, and her latest one is The Essential Fundraiser's Handbook. One of the themes that I found especially helpful was about what charities can do to connect more easily with younger donors. In fact, we found that many of the ideas that help you attract younger supporters will anyway help you improve relationships and results with supporters of any age. I really enjoyed chatting to Lisa, and in particular her insights about what it's like to be a so-called major donor on the receiving end of a fundraising relationship with a charity. I hope you find it helpful too. Hey Lisa, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Rob, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You and I spoke 2 or 3 years ago, I think, about your first book, Philanthropy Revolution, which I really enjoyed. And then I've been meaning for quite a long time to get you on the podcast, and I'm so pleased that finally we've made it happen, because you've written another book, The Essential Fundraiser's Handbook, which I've also really enjoyed. There's so much really good stuff in there for anyone who works, especially in high value fundraising, but frankly, anyone who works in fundraising will get lots from it. And I'm delighted that you're able to talk a bit about the book, and in particular, this burning issue of what charities could be doing slightly differently in terms of younger supporters or donors. But just before we get on to that, I do think your perspective is very interesting, not least compared to some of my other guests, because you are not only a consultant and you help charities and not-profits with their approach, but your perspective is as a major donor yourself and a philanthropist. Could you just help us tune into that with how you entered that world and what you discovered?
Right. Thank you. So I was raised in a very middle-class household in Los Angeles, and my husband was raised in Toronto, also from a middle-class household where we didn't use the word philanthropist because that sort of sounded like somebody putting on airs and really obnoxious. So that wasn't just something we did. We weren't major donors. I didn't even know what a major donor was. And then at one point, about 12 years ago now, my husband, his company went public that he'd been working on for many years. And I sold my company. And we found ourselves at a different seat at the table where all of a sudden we had the ability and we actually became major donors. And that was all great, except that we didn't know the language of being a donor because we hadn't done that. And I didn't think it would be mysterious. It sounded very basic that you give somebody money and they say thank you, and that should be it. But we learned that that was actually not the case. And with our first donation, actually the word thank you wasn't even said. And it was a very large donation because they were concerned that they hadn't made an ask and gone through the appropriate steps in that. And I thought, that's very strange. And then our first 2 major gifts were both unsolicited. We decided that we wanted to do something. We weren't on their list. But because we weren't on the list, and because they didn't go through the usual steps, they didn't know what to do with us. And I'm finding that to still be the case, where even small donations, if I give somebody money, and I just say, like, I'm really impressed and whatever, I see their website and I'm interested, and we send them money, I would say somewhat often I get some sort of query back saying, like, who are you and why did you give us money? Which is very strange. So I still think it's weird that people can't understand why people would give unsolicited gifts. And to our point for today, I think that younger people are actually even more likely to do that than older people, and we shouldn't be so mystified by them.
Yeah, and it was really insightful for me to read your first book because it was very much your reaction to this discovery and your mission to try and help some charities see that could happen, even if not on purpose. And I'm hoping most of my listeners would be shouting at their car stereo right now, or they stop their run and think, what did I hear right? And they would be astonished. And yet you've discovered, this is not unique to one community. It's not unique to one country. Even if there is no malign intent, inadvertently, these kinds of things can happen.
They can happen. They do happen. I speak all over the country, all over the world, actually, now, often. And at the very beginning, I was thinking, well, this must be only happening to me. I must have said something wrong. I must have done something wrong. And then I found out that it's super common and that everybody I've spoken to, and before I even started writing my books, I wanted to make sure that nobody could say to me, well, that's just you. And I wasn't sure if it was just me, but I did find out that everywhere I speak, somebody comes forward, everywhere. They can be fundraisers, they can be non-fundraisers, it doesn't matter. And they all say we've had the same experience. So sometimes it might be a different version of it, but it's always the same kind of experience where somebody hasn't said thank you. I hear that all the time. I've even heard actual consultants saying you shouldn't say thank you anymore because there's a power imbalance and therefore donors don't get told thank you. And it was kind of very strange. I read something this morning that somebody was suggesting that when you give a gift, the gift should have your name prominently on them. So you shouldn't have anything that's in any way invisible, which some people do that for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's concern that maybe if somebody is invisible, that maybe they're hiding something, whatever. But it basically said, no, you have to step forward and say, this is me. It is my name. And I thought, well, that's going a little far. To say to the donor, you have to do it this way is a little weird. Why can't someone just say thank you? I explain it to people as you learn when you're a year, 18 months old, maybe, that you say thank you. And so just say thank you. And I think the donors can say thank you for letting that happen as well. But to not say thank you is I think, strange and inappropriate. And I'm sure we'll have naysayers out there. But I just find that if we can't even have just common courtesy, then there's really a bigger problem out there.
Yeah, it's not just about the thank you. It's really about the deeper respect and trust for this relationship that has happened. One of the themes I really found interesting in your book is to do with younger donors. And it's part of the bigger picture of how many charities are not changing with the times. They're still operating in a kind of an old school model that may have worked to some extent 20 or 30 years ago in terms of who many of their donors were and how they may or may not have liked to be treated. I'm actually still skeptical as to whether we treat, many of the older donors of a particular homogenous group. If I'm picturing those 70-year-old men, many of whom are white, I'm not sure actually we even treat them very well. But that said, many charities are not moving with the times and tuning in to the fact that all kinds of generations care about their cause. And I think, not to overstate it, they're missing a big trick. What's your take on how that's happening and why it's happening?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'll take the why it's happening first. My take on it after talking to lots and lots of people about this, and I learned this really early on in my work, probably at least 5 years ago. And I talked to somebody who was a very major fundraiser, worked for some large fundraising organizations, had been doing it, career fundraiser. And I said, why is it that you guys can't understand that younger people are giving and that they don't want to have lunch with you? Basically was what I said to her. I said, if you're working for, a Google or a Meta or whatever it is, you're not taking lunch. You don't want to be pulled away for an hour and a half for somebody to ask you for money. So you probably are having lunch because at these big tech companies, they're providing lunch is for you anyway, and that's part of the culture. Why can't you understand that? And why do you keep making them sit down at lunch to ask them for money? And she said, well, it's a different language. And she said, we have two choices. We have limited resources as fundraisers, which fundraisers have all over the place. And we have the older group, the people in their 70s and 80s and beyond, who like it done a certain way. It's been done a certain way for a long time. They're used to it being done a certain way. Very often they'll say, I'll meet with you once a year. We have our lunch and then we're going to give you money and we don't want to hear from you the rest of the year. People would say things like that. And she said, but then there's these younger people who want completely the opposite. They want interaction. They want to know about impact. They want more detail. They want more of a partnership. They want a conversation. Whereas the older people might not really want to know about the fundraiser. I don't want to know why do you have passion. I just want you to ask me for my money and I'm going to give you my money. So she said, we actually have two very, very different audiences and we don't have the resources to go to both. So, and we have to choose one. So we might as well choose the older guys who we've been working with forever and just try and get them to give us a little bit more money each year, because otherwise we have to learn this new language of younger people. And I think that is still the case today, but I don't think we have the luxury as a sector of ignoring that or saying it's too hard. I think we have to find a way to do it. And I actually don't think it's that difficult.
Yeah. There's all kinds of reasons we should solve it anyway, but the bigger picture of how wealth is being transferred right now and across the next 10 to 15 years give a very compelling reason, or even bigger reason, why smart charities do need to get on with that to do with the transfer of wealth. Could you touch on that research?
So there's actually two things happening at once. And this part I don't hear people talking about. I hear a lot of people talking about the great wealth transfer, which in the US at least is double digits of trillions of dollars, huge amount of money that is being transferred from these older people to younger people. But at the same time, we have the largest number of young rich people, wealthy people that we've ever had in the world. And we also have this other piece where we have women who are now controlling a lot of the world's wealth. Like they're saying that 60% of donations to nonprofits have something to do, or probably a lot to do, or decided by women. And yet the young people who are now becoming wealthy when they're young, and the women and other ethnic groups and things who are now being a part of the puzzle are just still ignored. And so we have now in the US alone, and I'm just using this because this is something I was able to get data on, but we have about 1 million-ish, possibly a little more, millionaires under the age of 30. And yet people will tell me all the time, well, we can't have board members who are under 30 because they don't have any money. And they'll literally say that right after I say to them, there's over 1 million of them that have money, that are millionaires, and they just can't process that information. So now we have all these first generation wealthy people. And on top of it, we have the great wealth transfer. So we're actually going to create a new breed. And I don't know that anyone's named this yet. They're now going to be getting those inheritances. And yet, we've been ignoring all of that. But as a sector, there's been this choice that I mentioned earlier about, well, we don't have a lot of resources, so we're just going to basically go to what I call the 10 old white guys. So no disrespect intended, but the 10 older white guys who are in their 80s or something have been doing this forever. And those are the people that we're going to keep going to. And it makes no sense logically. It's a very, very obviously a very short-term point of view. And it's also, more importantly, not only is it an unsustainable way of thinking, but it's also insulting to this entire landscape of younger people who have money. And I worry that that's going to turn off those people. And they're going to say, I'm just going to give my money to my cat because I just can't bear this. This is like you're treating me like I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve the conversation because I'm either too young or the wrong gender or whatever it is. And that's not okay.
Thank you, Lisa. I totally agree. And we've touched on this already, but just to be explicit, and it comes across beautifully in your book, what are 2 or 3 of the most obvious differences in terms of how younger donors, for instance, those in their 20s or 30s, tend to like to get involved in good causes compared to older generations?
Right. They're much more, as a group, again, not all, but as a group, they're much more hands-on. They actually want to know about the organization, and they also want to know about the person who's asking them for money. The idea of them saying, ask me for money and then come back next year and I don't want to hear from you, That's just not going to happen with younger donors. It would be very, very unlikely. They want to trust who they're working with. They want to also get a sense of the culture of the organization that they're funding, and they want to have something to do with it besides being money. They just don't want to just give money. So a lot of them are now volunteering for organizations so that they can get a sense of the culture and basically the kind of people that are part of that organization and how it's run. And if they decide that they see that they're jerks, they're not going to give to that organization, and they won't identify themselves when they're being a volunteer. So they'll say their name, but it won't be, oh, I have money and I'm going to check you out first. They won't tell you that. And they are assuming that many of them will be dysfunctional, and they want to know that before they give any kind of money. So I think it's brilliant, actually, but most nonprofits are not aware it's happening. We need to understand that in those groups of volunteers, I have people who say to me, well, I'm going after everybody on my donor list, but I haven't gone after, but then I just have my volunteers. And I was like, well, go look at your volunteers, because I guarantee you, if you have a lot of volunteers, there are people in there who have money who will be interested if you just talk to them.
To that point, I remember a few years ago talking to someone who worked in the legacy bequest department for a very large, well-known charity that happens to have a lot of retail outlets, charity shops in various locations in the UK, but not in other cities, not in other towns. And they were able to map very clearly the data. Huge percentage of bequests came in towns where they had a charity shop. And actually, the majority of those weren't from the people who were popping in to get a cheap jumper and have done some good. They were from the people who were slogging in to do their 4 hours volunteering because they cared deeply about the cause. And they also happened to have the wealth to be able to make a generous donation in their will.
Wow. If that's written up anywhere, I would love to see that. I think that's a lovely story. And we have to start thinking of volunteers. And also, I'm very big on monthly donors, recurring donors. They're also thought of as being sort of the second class donor kind of thing. And there's a wonderful piece of research that came out about 3 months ago from an organization called Neon One that I recommend all of your listeners check out. It's free. Because a lot of times people say, well, our senior people aren't working with those regular monthly donors because they just give very little and it's every month. But you know what? That little every month ends up being a lot over time. And their research from this Neon One project shows that the annual donor, more or less, someone who gives about once a year, will stay with your organization about 1.7 years. So some of them will drop off. A lot of them will drop off between year 1 and year 2. With the monthly donors at any amount, whether it's £5 a month or it's 100, it doesn't matter. They're staying with the organizations 8 to 9 years, continually giving. They're much, much less likely to leave and stop giving than people who are giving once a year. And they're also much more likely to give a second gift during the year that's a single gift. That if you call them during the year, they've been giving you their monthly donation for a couple of years, and you send them something and say, hey, we have this particular need right now, they are much more likely to jump in and give that second gift. And a lot of people didn't believe that was the case, but this particular survey surveyed about 150,000 nonprofits, and they found that that was absolutely what was happening. So this idea of, well, you know, the monthly donors, we don't give them a lot of attention, they're very little amounts of money, whatever, that's just not okay. So the research is telling us that these people are there, they're confirming what a lot of us thought, and we need to pay attention to it because we're leaving money on the table otherwise.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and it chimes with a story a friend of mine sometimes shares on our courses. We both used to work for a well-known children's charity in the UK, and she at one point was tasked with carrying out some research into those donors who had given over £1 million at a particular point in that charity's history. And at the time there were 7 since the beginning of that campaign. Who are they? Where did they come from? She discovered when she looked back, and she was taken aback by this because she was presuming that there was big famous people that were on a list somewhere. 6 out of the 7 had started supporting that charity 20 years before at £2 or £5 a month. And they had been well looked after and treated as someone who cares, and they were listened to, and if and when appropriate, they got an extra conversation or an extra thank you or an extra cup of coffee. And 6 out of the 7 of those £1 million donors had started, according to the database, no different from the other £5 a month donors.
Hi dear listener, Rob here, and I've got a question for you. If you find these podcasts helpful, then can you imagine just how much more helpful it would be if you and your team could spend an entire day learning and practicing our bright spot fundraising techniques on a bespoke training day. Don't just take my word for it. We recently received this feedback from Shelley Thompson, Head of Partnerships at Oxfam GB, about the difference that bright spot training has made for them.
Things are harder now. The no unsolicited application and the closed doors are every way we're turning, as far as I'm concerned, in my team specifically as new partnerships. And when we did Bright Spot training, it was like, this is a different way to approach something. And it's not hugely time laborious. It's just very smart, different ways of approaching something that you need to allow yourself to give the time to. But when you do, it makes a difference. And the results that we're getting from that are something our team specifically has not seen in a very long time. I know that it's tens of thousands just in my team, and I know that it's tens of thousands in our mirroring development team as well. That is definitely worth it. And we're not even a year after the training yet. I just think it's where you should spend your money and where you should spend your time if you want results.
If you'd like to book a quick chat about an away day or team training to help your team grow its results, go to brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services, or just send me a message via LinkedIn.
I wonder what else you would recommend our listeners do to really understand and meet the needs of younger generations who care.
So one of them is this idea of saying that they have to be, in order to ask them for money, you have to take them to lunch. That's just a big thing, right? You have to take them for a meal or a drink. Usually it's for lunch. It's almost always for lunch. I personally do not like doing the lunches. I feel like it's kind of a waste of time because I feel like it's an hour and a half of talking about pretending to be friends, and then at the end they ask you for money. If they haven't told me at the beginning they're going to ask me for money, because I try not to assume that. I try to say, well, yes, because they always start with, we'd like to get to know you. We'd like to just introduce ourselves. We'd like to tell you about our organization. Okay, that's fine. I would like to take them at face value and say that is really what's happening. My husband thinks I'm insane and that I should just figure they're going to ask me for money. And I had one of these meetings a couple of days ago, and I thought, make the ask at the beginning and just say, this is going to be about money. We'd like you to give us money, and we're going to tell you about our organization, but we'd also like to get to know you. I would rather they do it in the opposite order, because otherwise, that whole hour and a half conversation I have with them, when at the end they say, oh, yes, just one more thing. This literally happens to me once a week. One more thing. And then they ask me for money. And I always know when they say one more thing or just a minute. And I'm ready to leave at this point. And because I'm thinking, oh, it's been an hour and a half. They didn't ask me for money. This is great. We really are getting to know each other. This is a really great first step. And then at the end, when they ask me anyway, all I think is it immediately in my mind, that hour and a half of relationship feels fake and false, and that I'm sort of a chump for even feeling like the person even enjoyed my company. And that's a really horrible feeling. And I don't want to give them money at that point. So I have come up with a couple of easier ways of dealing with this. And I think young people will really not put up with that. So if you have a lunch, and if the person agrees to have a lunch with you, and this is for any donor at any age, you just say to them, I'd like to get to know you and speak with you about financially supporting our organization. That's all you have to say. And then everybody knows what it's going to be. Or you say, I'd like to get to know you, and I won't be asking you for money. And if you say that, just don't ask them for money, because I have had people say that, and then they ask you for money at the end. And then I think, I can't trust this person. So that's one piece. The other is you need to realize that leaders of a lot of these large charities too, who say you have to be out there. Our metrics are that you have to go to all these people. You have to go to lunch every day. You have to be out there. Realizing that younger people, that might not be the way that they give. And I know a lot of nonprofits who say you can't ask someone for money over Zoom. And that's just not true. I'm much more happy with somebody asking you for money over Zoom if I don't have to go to the lunch, because the lunch is time I could have spent with a million other things in my life. And if it's going to be a fake thing anyway, then why would I bother? I don't need to have that particular stake, I guess it would be. We have to get the charities in the world to say it's completely fine to ask somebody for money over Zoom. And if they don't want to, you can ask them, would you like to have lunch? Or would you like to have a conversation about financially supporting our organization and learning about our organization over Zoom? And I have to say that after COVID, a lot of people would rather, have their pajama bottoms on while they're having someone ask them for money than having to get dressed up to have somebody ask them for money.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder what you've found in terms of other things to do with communication style, moving away potentially from, 4 times a year, a particular big, thick report sent by email.
Yes.
Actually, one doesn't have to be Gen Gen Z or Gen X to actually use WhatsApp in the UK. People of all generations run a lot of their life with these other more easy, nimble, agile ways of communicating. I wonder what you've noticed about communication style and indeed ways of bringing the cause to life, or rather the difference that the charity is making.
So one of my suggestions is to look at every single thing that you do, what your process is. It's giving the annual report, doing the quarterly, whatever it is, or your annual giving, and looking at that and saying to yourself, why do we do it that way? And you have to have a reason. And I find that when organizations do that, they can't remember the reason. They usually say, oh, because you know the answer to this. I'll even ask you, Rob, what's the answer to that?
Well, that's how we did it last year.
That's right. It's always been done that way. So that's why we do it. And so I say, look, you know what? We have a new world here. And really, this should have been done every couple of decades anyway over history. But we need to look at them and say, why do we do it that way? Why do we do this annual report? And I guarantee you, most people will say, I don't know. It's just because we've always done it that way. And nobody can really think of a reason.
There was someone on my course recently. It's a writing course I teach. But one of the kind of ironic bits of the course is how often I say, like, if you really think about the outcome you wanted this piece of communication to achieve, it was for that person to feel this way and potentially want to get in touch with you in that way, or is sending a document even the answer? And someone from a charity to do with disability, like, she went straight away, and where it would have been a 12-page document as an annual report, she sent a 1-page, but created a wonderful film instead. And the 1 page had a link to the gorgeous film. And she said the level of engagement was unprecedented.
That's right.
And how people, and again, to my point, it wasn't just the 20 or 30-year-olds. It was all of them. Surprise, surprise, were happier that it brought it to life, and B, it was more interesting and engaging and easier to digest the information.
Yes, we need to realize that it's not just an age thing, although the idea of these younger people having money and the older people passing away, that is forcing us to make these decisions, but we should have been doing this all along. You're right. What I suggest is I have something that I call the 4 questions. It's in my new book. So the 4 questions are, again, the first one is, how do you like to be referred to? And one of the pieces to think about with this is donors are not aliens. They are not people from another planet. They're people just like us. And every single person is a donor. Everybody, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You could be the poorest person ever, and you have given a coat to somebody at some point. So everybody's a donor. So to say, what does a donor think of that, doesn't really make any sense. Everybody, not every donor, everybody knows how they want to be referred to. The second question is, how do you like to be communicated with? Which every retail outlet who has email has asked for decades. And for some reason, we don't ever ask that. So do you prefer email or text messaging or telephone? Everyone knows how they want to be communicated with. And it could say all of the above. I don't care. That could be one of the choices. And that's totally fine. If they like text messaging, you might want to say in there, and you're not offering text messaging, say coming soon. The third question is, how do you like to be thanked? And everybody knows how they want to be thanked. And the continuum for this is, on one end, it's anonymous, and the other end, it's marching band. And most people are somewhere in between there. But people know how they want to be thanked. Do you want to be thanked in public? Do you want to be thanked in private? Do you want it to be whatever? So you can give them some choices, and they can tell you, check the box, tick the box off of which one they want to do, they're comfortable with. And the fourth question is, back to your piece about the annual reports, is how often do you want to be notified of our progress towards our mission? And people know that too. Most people are going to say that they want to be notified as it happens. The choices you give them are as it happens, monthly, quarterly, or annually. And you will find, and everyone I know who's done this survey has called me back and said, oh my gosh, they don't want the annual report. They just want to know kind of as it happens, or once a month. And so, or it could be a digest of information. And I find, especially with younger people and newer donors, that they want to know what their money has done. They want to know about impact. So they want to know, hey, guess what? Your money did this month. We were able to buy this month. We helped this kid this month. So those are my 4 questions. And if you do that and you can incorporate it into what you're doing and how you're communicating, you will find a world of difference. And I think it's just very important. But the most important thing, even more compelling than the questions, is that when these surveys are done, the donors come back and say, we didn't know that you cared. We didn't know that you see us as an individual. And there's an inherent message in it, an implicit message that says, we see you as an individual enough to ask you what your preferences are, which makes the donor feel much better about the relationship and much more inclined to give and have a relationship with you. So it's a very, very simple tool that does a world of good.
Thank you, Lisa. So time has flown by. I knew it would. I've so enjoyed reading your new book, and I'll put a link to your website in our show notes so that people can follow there and go and find out about both your books as well as the other things that you do and the tips and things that you share through your newsletter and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for coming on the podcast to share your ideas for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
There you go. I hope you enjoyed Lisa's insights and tips. As we always do, we'll put a summary in the episode notes on the podcast section of our Bright Spot website, including a link to Lisa's book, The Essential Fundraiser's Handbook, and to my other episodes about next generation fundraising. You've probably already subscribed to our podcast, but just in case you haven't yet, do click the button now. You'll get instant access through your phone to dozens more strategies and examples to help you with your fundraising. As I'm recording this, I've got to tell you I'm incredibly excited about the new batch of Bright Spot stories I'm going to be sharing in the next few weeks. So please, please don't miss out on the chance to receive those straight away when we release them. Remember, if you find this podcast, my books, webinars, or our breakfast club helpful, and you're curious about the difference it would make if I went deeper and could help your whole team, then do get in touch to request a chat. If you work in major donor or corporate fundraising, our flagship programs Major Gifts Mastery and Corporate Partnerships Mastery will boost your confidence and help you transform your results. Or if you're the leader of a team, our bespoke training days are a powerful way to lift your team's skills and momentum. To find out more or request a chat, go to brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services. And if you like today's show and you think it would help other people, please do share it on with your colleagues and with other good causes through LinkedIn. Do let us know what you think. Lisa and I are both on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the Fundraising Bright Spot show. Good luck, and I can't wait to share more encouraging stories with you very soon.